People used to say that sustainable development or sustainable economic development was an oxymoron. I think that's rubbish. I think that development now has to be sustainable or it just shouldn't happen.
The natural step is a framework of principles grounded in natural science that over the past 20 years have gained worldwide acceptance. The natural step principles serve as a guide for businesses, communities, educators, governments, and individuals on the path towards sustainable development. The first step of the natural step principles reminds us that in a sustainable society, nature is not subject to systematically increasing concentrations of substances extracted from the Earth's crust. The second step reminds us that in a sustainable society, nature is not subject to systematically increasing concentrations of substances produced by society. The third step reminds us that in a sustainable society, nature is not subject to increasing degradation by physical means. And the fourth step reminds us that in a sustainable society, people are not subject to conditions that systematically undermine their capacity to meet their needs. Water conservation and conservation of our forest lands are a big focus for the companies we'll visit next. This clear-cut forest is an example of the degradation of nature which the natural step seeks to avoid through the application of its third step.
I'm concerned about the temperature changes. I'm concerned about how those temperature changes affect the forests. I was actually a forester for 10 years and fought fires for 10 years. So the forests now are a little bit different. In many areas they're much drier and the fires are much larger. So it's a whole different beast out there now.
Mark Gowden and the Joinery have become known as one of Portland's finest furniture makers. Part of the reason for this success is Mark's decision to use only woods that come from sustainably managed forests.
All the wood is hand-selected. Every board is put in its place for the specific reason. It's not done by a machine, it's all hand-built. When we really get into the details with our customer on how a piece is made, how all the grains line up on drawers and the book matching of door panels, all these things are added value. And by the way, when you're purchasing this, it comes from a well-managed forest. Most of our wood comes from the Collins forests back in Pennsylvania. The cherry, the maple, poplar, some oaks. We call that Collins wood. The impact when they harvest their woods on the environment is so minimal, and you can see all around that it's done correctly. The streams are still going strong, the fish are there, the biodiversity, the whole ecosystem, it's really great. I often wonder with the global warming what will eventually happen to the forests back east and the forests out west. We'll see.
Truman Collins, the founder of the Collins Companies, came out west with his family at the turn of the last century. Collins' goals were to harvest the thousands of acres of forest lands he had purchased in the most efficient way possible. And, as every generation of Collins family members since Truman has known, the best way to harvest a forest is with the help of a loyal community of hard-working employees and their families who are treated well and know that their jobs will last as long as the forest continues to produce timber. This was the origin of the Collins concept of sustainable forestry practices, a concept which supports a thriving wood products business which continues to this day. Today, the Collins Companies have 3 sustainable forests. Their original hardwood forest in Pennsylvania and 2 pine forests in the west, one in Lakeview, Oregon, and the other in Chester, California.
The forests in Lakeview are a little different than the forests in Chester. They're a newer acquisition forest that's been in the family for less than 50 years, most of it. And so some of the forestry is actually, we're rehabbing down there. I mean, it was previously cut over, some of it pretty hard. So a lot of what we're doing in Lakeview is going to be more restoration forestry, where we're doing a lot of thinning. We're trying to nurture the fewer older trees so that we'll have a more mature forest going forward. The true resource for us in our forest isn't the trees. The real resource is the topsoil. So everything we do in our forest is to manage for that topsoil. The biodiversity of the animals, the trees, the waterways, the continuous forest canopy, all that goes back to trying to manage that magical topsoil. We know a lot of what makes topsoil work, and the ribosomes and all the microbes that are in there and the carbon, but like a lot of nature's miracles, we don't really understand how it all works, and probably the best thing that we can do is step out of the way and let nature do its part.
What does letting nature do its part mean? For Collins, it means cutting only those trees that will allow the forest to become healthier. It means leaving bark, branches, and leaves on the ground to decompose and enrich the topsoil. It means keeping the watershed clean by maintaining the continuous forest canopy. It means allowing the forest to reseed itself naturally. All these steps combine into a forest maintenance approach called biomimicry. Over the past 20 years, the fire season in the United States has grown by 78 days, an increase tied to higher average temperatures and earlier snowmelt. In July, a fire broke out in the federal forest surrounding the Collins Lakeview Forest. The fire illustrates some of the profound differences between two approaches to maintaining healthy forests.
We spend billions of dollars preventing forest fires, but then we don't turn around and thin the forest, which the forest fires would have done if they would have let those forest fires go through there on a regular basis. And we suppressed fires for 100 years. So you go down to the federal lands, drive along, look at our lands, and they're nice and spread out. You can see 100 feet, 300 feet into the forest. And then you get onto the federal lands, and it's a thicket because the fires have been suppressed, but they haven't thinned the land.
The Collins companies have been nurturing sustainable forests for over 150 years. In practice, the company has been implementing the basic principles of sustainability since Truman Collins bought his first stand of timber.
At each of our facilities, we have sawmills, we have facilities right there at our forests. We don't ship the logs, we don't export the logs, we don't ship the logs to a central location where they're processed. We try and keep the value in that town so that all you're doing is helping to reinvigorate and reuse the dollars there locally. And from the natural step standpoint, that's very important to keep the funds in the community and keep the local community vibrant.